We would never think to ignore a sequence in a book. The sequence is a big deal in the book. And there's two ways to think about the sequence in a book, depending on how you view the items, what you view as an item inside that book. The first thing to think of is each item is a page. Not a bad way to think of items of information in a book. And we invented, not we invented pages. Well, actually, I think you can make a case that we did invent pages to segment the information into reliable chunks. And one thing as an aside to think about is the size of a page in a book is a set quantity. You know, a page is whatever it is, 200 to 300 words of text, etc. But we know that a 200-page book is exactly twice the size of a 100-page book. We borrowed that concept on the web, and we still call things pages, but we somehow managed to let go of that idea that each page is equally sized. Each page in a book really kind of has to be equally sized for physical reasons, but as an introduction to this wider topic, think about what we left behind when we said that each web page can be anything you want. It can be one word, or it could be 10,000 words. What have we left behind there? We had a very nice unit of measurement of information before, the page. But is the page in the web world a really good unit of measurement? I'd say it isn't, because you don't know how big a page is. You also don't know exactly what's going to be on a page. A page is like a file. You know, you say, I have 10,000 files on my computer. Well, what does that really tell me about what you have on your computer? Not a whole lot, because I need to know what's in those files before I can know. But if you say I have 10,000 pages in my book, you know a lot about that book. So when we left behind that concept of standard page size, which, you know, there's good reasons for it. You don't have to, I mean, we felt like we were being liberated from the page when we did that, right? Because we used to be constrained to have a certain amount of text on a page, and images could only be a certain size, and flow would work on a page-by-page basis, etc. There were reasons why people were happy to not have to focus on that anymore. But we did lose something along the way. And I would say that in general, we lost something along the way with sequences as we've moved from print to the web. So let me back up for a second and finish the thought that I began earlier. There's two ways to think of what an item in a book is. One is to think that it's a page, and so every page is an item of information in that book, and there's a sequence of those items, right? Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and you're meant to see page 1 before page 2, generally speaking. Another way to think of this, the items inside of a book is that each section is an item. And once again, we have those sections sequenced. We have them in a branch-wise sequence based on the table of contents. Table of contents is an outline that shows all of the items, and to some extent, it's not a the table of contents itself is not sequential. You don't really go from the beginning to the end of the table of contents. You kind of jump into the middle of it trying to find what it is you're looking for. But the sections themselves are sequenced. They're sequenced based on a branch-wise traverse of that table of contents hierarchy. So two ways to think of an item inside of a book. One is that it's the page. The other is that it's a section. In either case, in the book world, we have very strong standards that dictate that those pages or sections be ordered in a particular way, be sequenced in a particular way, and they're usually hand sequenced. We usually choose what goes on the first page, second page, third page. It's not done by any kind of algorithm or any kind of sorting. However, we move to the web now, and is there a mandate? Is there a strong sense that we ought to sequence our information, that there ought to be at least some primary sequence that has all the information in its proper relation before and after other pieces of information? And the answer is clearly no, there isn't. We have no assumption that on the web there'll be any particular kind of sequence. And in fact, most often, I would say in the vast majority of websites, there's really no notion of sequencing at all, except in very minor places like in wizards and in procedures and things like that. But the items of information on the site aren't sequenced at all. And once again, I would say that there's obvious reasons for that, and the first of which is we're liberated from that sequence. We were bound to have all of our items in the same order and always show them in the same order, and that was really a constraint, and now with that constraint's lifted so we can do whatever we want. But part of the liberation of doing whatever you want is also recognizing that sometimes that's the right thing to do. That the right thing to do is to order things in a specific sequence and give the user the feeling that there is a right traverse through this information, and not leaving it entirely up to them to figure out what the right traverse through the information is. So a few things to think about. What did we leave behind? What have we lost when we lost that paradigm? I talked before about losing the notion of a standard page size, losing the notion that when you have 10,000, it's exactly twice as much as having 5,000 items. Well, a few other things we've left behind. What do you know when you're on page 500 of a 1,000-page book? Clearly, you know you're halfway through. How would you ever know if you were halfway through a website? Now, you might argue, why do I ever need to know that I'm halfway through a website? And I'd say, well, there's certainly are situations. It's not that you always have to know you're halfway through the website, but in some cases, you really should know that you're halfway through the website. You should have the ability to know, this is an information base, I'm responsible for encompassing this entire information base, I have to somehow take it all into account, and I'm halfway there. The idea of being able to compare one website to another. Is this a big website or a little website? Well, it has 10,000 pages. Well, mine has 20,000 pages, but yours is actually smaller than mine. Your 20,000 pages only have 3 sentences per page, and mine have, 20 paragraphs per page. So the idea of being able to compare, how big is this? Is this a really big site, or is this a medium-sized site? The number of pages on that site is not a good indication, and we've lost that as we've moved from strict sequencing to not strict sequencing. The idea of am I getting into the real meat yet? Am I at the beginning, introductory stuff, all the things that you know about? The ability to say where I am sort of topologically. I put my finger in the middle of the book. I know that I'm in the middle, and I can come back to the middle. I knew it was around the middle. It itself is a navigation technique. How many times have you gone back to a page of the book by figuring out where it was in the sequence of the book, not by navigating to it by an index or a hierarchy? No ability to do that well, not no ability to do that, no, very little usage of that, very little leverage of those techniques on the web. So imagine a website, and on the side of the website, and you'll say, well, do we need page numbers then? And do we need to divide our information into equal-sized chunks in order to make all that work? And I'll give you a very simple example of a user interface that covers that gives you that ability without harking back to how we did it in the print world. We have the idea on a page of the scroll bar, right? That scroll bar actually operates for a page a lot like the way that the page number operates for a book. It lets you know where you are. Am I halfway through the page, or am I 3/4 of the way through the page? How many times have you used that scroll bar actually to find the place on the page where you know something is because you knew where it was relative to the beginning and the end of the page? What if there was the equivalent of a scroll bar for the entire site? And when you were in a particular place in the site, that scroll bar was on the right location for that site. That's the idea of sequencing. Scroll bars are all about sequencing. You go from the beginning to the end with the scroll bar. So the idea of sequencing is there for us. We just don't happen to, we rarely use it at the item level. We use it inside an item to navigate around the item, but we don't use it between items. Okay, so what I wanted to talk to you about was why and why sequences are neglected on the web and what you could do about it. And I come back again to what I said at the beginning of this topic about I really just want you to think about it. I want you to consider sequences as a tool among all the tools you have in your tool belt for getting something done, for making something happen. And not just leaving them out the way most people who have designed information spaces for electronic publications have left them out.